and welcome back to the YouTube channel of the National Association of Flight Instructors. My name is Sarah Stout. I'm the Program Development Manager here at NAFI. We're back again today to talk about a new final rule from the FAA that goes into effect December 2nd, 2024. This final rule is primarily centered around logging flight time in public aircraft and flying and instructing for compensation or hire in certain experimental or other categories of aircraft. Along the way, the FAA realized that some of the elements of Part 61 needed to be revised. These elements include a new definition of the word passenger, a new option for acting as pilot in command on currency flights, and clarification on the scope of flight instructor privileges. The first big change is in 61.1, applicability and definitions. In paragraph Bravo, there will be a new definition for the word passenger, which surprisingly was never well defined in the past. Now it will specifically mean any person on board an aircraft other than a crew member, FAA personnel, manufacturer personnel required for type certification, or a person receiving or providing flight training, checking, or testing as authorized by this part. So the FAA drew a wide envelope here to ensure that individuals who are, perhaps engineers as part of a test certification, as well as flight instruction, are also clearly defined in the regulations as not being a passenger. When this final rule comes into effect on December 2nd, 2024, and Part 61 will now have a formal definition of the word passenger, other elements of Part 61 that previously referenced passengers or used the word passenger that no longer fit the new definition will also be changed. Most notably, for flight instructors, student pilots, and pilots as a whole, the biggest change to this is going to be 6157, recent flight experience for pilots in command. This rule will change to say no person may act as pilot in command of an aircraft carrying persons or of an aircraft certificated for more than one pilot flight crew member unless, and goes on to describe the 3 landings in 90 days that we're used to. That part of 6157 isn't changing. So where we saw may not act as pilot in command of an aircraft carrying passengers, now it says persons. And the same will also change in paragraph Bravo, which is where it talks about night currency. That will also change from carrying passengers to carrying persons, although the rest of the language about the 1 hour after sunset and 1 hour before sunrise and landings to a full stop remain unchanged. Further down the regulation will become a new paragraph Echo, which will describe in subparagraph 5 that paragraphs Alpha and Bravo, so those two we just referenced, do not apply to a person receiving flight training from an authorized instructor, provided the flight training is limited to the purpose of meeting the requirements of paragraph Alpha or Bravo, so your day or night currency. And then notwithstanding the provisions, the person receiving the flight training meets all other requirements to act as pilot in command of the aircraft. So someone who is not technically current by the recent experience requirements of 6157 would then be able to act as pilot in command of an aircraft as long as on that flight they are receiving flight instruction from an authorized instructor. That flight is only for the purpose of regaining that recent flight experience. They're otherwise current, so they have a valid flight review. And the last criteria here is that the authorized instructor and the person receiving the flight training are the sole occupants of the aircraft. So that's a big change, a new option to be able to act as pilot in command during those types of flights. And of course, the flight instructor could also continue to be the pilot in command. And one final element that's being added to this regulation is under paragraph Echo, subparagraph 6. We'll say that paragraphs Alpha and Bravo, so our day and night currency, do not apply to the examiner or the applicant during a practical test required by this part. So the FAA is becoming more specific and more well-defined in when they want to see this currency being used, ways it can be used, and ways it can be regained. Over the course of this rulemaking, the FAA was required to take a look at 61-193, flight instructor privileges. In the discussion of the rule, it covers how if you were to take a very rigid and strict view of the current 61-193, it could be viewed as limiting flight instructors from doing activities that we're all already doing and the FAA is encouraging us to do, such as make model transitions, avionics transitions, upgrades, those types of things. Training that's not necessarily directly related or even contributing to a pilot certificate or rating, but still enhancing their skills and diversity of skill set and overall safety of flight. The FAA wants us doing this. On December 2nd, 2024, 61-193 flight instructor privileges will update in the regulations. Paragraph alpha will change, and it will say now, a person who holds a flight instructor certificate is authorized within the limitations of that person's flight instructor certificate and ratings to conduct ground training, flight training, certain checking events, and issue endorsements related to. So here the FAA is expanding on what's already written there by clearly spelling out ground training, flight training, checking events. Issuing endorsements was already in the current 61-193. Subparagraph 7 will be updated to a flight review, operating privilege, or recency of experience requirement of this part, or training to maintain or improve the skills of a certificated pilot. So that's where they're expanding this set. In this case, they do mean certificated pilot to mean someone who already holds a baseline certificate. So whether that be a sport or a recreational or a private pilot certificate, they need to have one of those for this to be open to them. But that's really who we're looking at anyways. All the other parts of the regulation already permit and allow for things, like that student pilot training and training towards new certificates and ratings. An important note here, paragraph Charlie says the privileges authorized in this section do not permit a person who holds a flight instructor certificate to conduct operations that would otherwise require an air carrier or operating certificate or a specific authorization from the administrator. So this is their, a fair warning. Don't do something you're not supposed to do and dress it up as flight training. They do know what 134.5s are. So make sure you're sticking to the rules and you're actually flight training when you're supposed to be flight training, and if not doing things that would otherwise require that air carrier certificate. Also to note, 61-413 will change. These are the privileges of a flight instructor certificate with a sport rating. The wording remains nearly the same between the two regulations. So as we can see here, paragraph alpha will also expand to include conducting ground training, flight training, certain checking events, and issuing endorsements related to. The rest of this regulation remains unchanged until subparagraph 6, where it is more specific than 61-193. So 61-413 will say a flight review operating privilege for a sport pilot or training to maintain or improve the skills of a sport pilot. And they'll also have paragraph Charlie here about not doing things that would otherwise require an air carrier certificate. So sport pilots, no 134.5s for you either. Thank you for tuning in to this regulatory update. Be sure to check out the NAFI YouTube channel for other regulatory and policy update videos. This video is made possible by the members of NAFI. If you aren't already a member, please consider joining. Everyone is welcome, and you can join online at nafinet.org.